Okay, next we have Dr. Sylvia Lin, and she'll be speaking about the neural correlates of emotion regulation mediating parenting effects on adolescent internalizing symptoms.
Thanks, Tiffany. And it's my first time being called doctor. I haven't got my thesis conferred, but thank you. All right, as I start, I first want to invite you to reflect on how do we come to understand emotions? Is it okay to be angry? Does feeling sad mean that we are weak? Or do we need to hide our anxiety and embarrassment? So our understanding of emotions and our relationship with emotions is largely shaped through the process of socialization. So just as we learn what behaviors are appropriate, we also learn about emotions, what they mean, how to manage them, and how to express them. And for young people, parents play a critical role in this process. For example, imagine a child feels quite anxious about an upcoming exam, and the parent responds with, "You will be okay, everyone's doing it, I'm sure you will do really well." Even though the parent tries to reassure, the message the child gets is that anxiety is probably not something valid and it's not helpful. So unsurprisingly, a lot of research has looked into the relationship between parenting and mental health outcomes in young people. But there are still many areas that should be explored and questions to be answered. First, many of the parenting programs are developed for parents of young children and focus on managing challenging behaviors rather than help young people to understand their emotions. And also there is a very common belief that as young people enter into adolescence, they only want to hang out with their peers and parents don't matter anymore. But the empirical evidence actually paints quite a different story. And here we can see that at age 10 to 11, 90% of young people still turn to their parents for help with the emotional or personal problem. And you can see that even at age 14 to 15, 70% of them still do. So although peers become increasingly important during early adolescence, parents continue to play a critical role in supporting their emotional development. And in fact, a few existing randomized control trials have shown that parenting interventions that target emotion and emotion regulation can reduce depression and anxiety in adolescents. But our study do want to go a step further. We don't just want to answer the question on whether interventions work, but how and why interventions work. In particular, we're very interested in understanding the neurobiological mechanisms that underpin parenting interventions. So I probably don't need to convince anyone here why the brain is fascinating, but I do want to highlight how dynamic the brain is during the early adolescent period. The transition from childhood to adolescent driven by puberty is one of the most dynamic periods of brain development. And neurodevelopmental models suggest that the subcortical affective regions, such as amygdala, hippocampus, they develop at a faster rate compared to the prefrontal control regions. And this may in part explain the behaviors we see in adolescents, for example, more risk-taking behaviors and increased mental health problems. At the same time, because the brain is very plastic, it's also very sensitive to environmental influences, which presents a window of opportunity for supportive parenting. So in our study, we aim to answer two research questions. The first question is whether an emotion-focused parenting intervention that's delivered to parents of early adolescents can not only change behavioral self-report outcomes, but also changes adolescent brain function. And secondly, we wanted to understand whether brain function mediates the relationship between intervention allocation and mental health outcomes. To do this, we conducted a randomized control trial with 70 mother-daughter diets. Half of the mother were in the intervention group where they received the Tuning into Teens intervention, which is centered around these 5 steps of emotion coaching. And another half of the participants were in the waitlist control group. At baseline and 6-month follow-up, adolescents completed MRI, and both mothers and adolescents completed some questionnaires at baseline, 6-month follow-up, and 8-month follow-up. Looking at the baseline demographics, we recruited adolescents with elevated depression or anxiety symptoms. And here you can see that we did recruited quite a homogeneous group to increase statistical power, and participants are from relatively high socioeconomic backgrounds, and we need to interpret our data within that context. For the task, we use the cognitive reappraisal task. So in this task, adolescents were presented with a bunch of negatively valenced images. In the reappraisal block, they were asked to come up with something to reinterpret what's happening in the picture to make themselves feel better. And this is contrasted with the look negative condition, where they were just looking at the negative images. Both adolescents and mothers reported on adolescent internalizing symptoms. So in terms of analysis, remember the first research question, we try to understand the intervention effect on brain activation and functional connectivity. And to do this, we conducted flexible factorial analysis in SPM to model group by time interaction. And we also included a subject factor to model random intercept. For activity, we conducted voxel-wise whole brain analysis and also analysis that was small volume corrected within the prefrontal cortex and bilateral amygdala, hippocampus, and insula. For functional connectivity, we conducted psychophysiological interaction, PPI analysis. So this gives us information about where in the brain functional connectivity with the seed regions, including amygdala, hippocampus, insula, differ as a function of task condition, which is regulation versus non-regulation here. And then for clusters, that showed a significant group by time interaction from the previous analysis. We extracted bold signal from the 5 millimeter radius sphere around the mean peak MNI coordinate for the follow-up mediation analysis. And mediation was conducted using the causal mediation models. Onto the results. First, we are interested in understanding whether there is intervention effect on adolescent brain function. So we found a significant group by time interaction on inferior frontal gyrus activity. And here you can see that intervention group, they are highlighted in orange, which shows that after the intervention, adolescents in the intervention group shows a reduced inferior frontal gyrus activity. This may seem a little bit counterintuitive because IFG has been implicated in a lot of goal-directed behaviors and in emotion regulation. But we thought this might actually reflect that after the intervention, adolescents, they can regulate their emotions, but the prefrontal control part of their brain doesn't need to work as hard. So it kind of shows that emotion regulation becomes less effortful and more efficient at a neural level. Looking at results from PPI analysis, we found that using insula as the seed ROI, there is increased functional connectivity between insula and precuneus, as well as between insula and supplementary model area after the intervention. Insula is a hub for interoception. So these results may suggest that after the intervention, there is a better integration of body sensations, of behavioral responses, and self-referential processing. Next, we are interested in understanding whether there is a mediation effect, whether brain function mediate the relationship between intervention and mental health outcomes. So the top 3 rows show models where the outcome is adolescent self-reported internalizing outcomes, and the bottom 3 rows are mother-reported adolescent internalizing outcomes. And as we can see the red line here, inferior frontal gyrus activity mediate the relationship between intervention and allocation and adolescent self-reported internalizing outcomes at a later follow-up. but we didn't find any mediation for mother-reported outcomes and not for functional connectivity. So now bringing it all together, what do these results mean? First, our study using a randomized control trial design for the first time to provide experimental evidence to show that parenting does get under the skin. So it's not just affecting adolescent self-report or parent self-report, it also influences brain function. And secondly, mediation findings suggest that inferior frontal gyrus activity might be a mediator. However, we only found that for adolescent self-report. And I think these results speaks to the importance of including adolescent reports in future studies, because a lot of the conclusions on whether parenting interventions are effective or not are concluded based on parent reports, which might be biased. But there are a lot of questions remain to be answered. I think in this study, we try to understand how intervention work, but we didn't really tease apart who will benefit the most from the intervention and under what circumstances it works the best. And I think in the future, it will be important for studies to consider child temperament, parent temperament, and also facilitators' temperament, and how that all come into play in this dynamic process. It will be also interesting to expand our studies to look at the impact of fathers and other caregivers. And I do want to note that there is still a long way to go for clinical translation in terms of how we can design more neuroscience-informed mechanism-targeted interventions to improve health outcomes. Lastly, I wanted to end with a note that we are not here to blame moms or to blame parents. There are a lot of structural factors that may place a strain on how parents can parent their children. And in my interactions with a lot of parents, what we do is really to invite parents to reflect on how they were being parented as a child and how that's leading to their automatic reactions to their own emotions and to their children's emotions. So the takeaway message I want you to have from this talk is that parenting matters, and there are things parents can learn about emotions, their own emotions, and also how to interact with their children to support healthy brain development. With that, I want to say thank you to all my collaborators, my supervisors, and I'm going to wear another hat. I'm working on Enigma puberty in my postdoc. If anyone has any data related to puberty, MRI, please scan the QR code and get in touch with us. Thank you.
Okay, we have time for a couple of questions. Come on up.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. It was wonderful. Okay, I guess I'm holding this now. So I was wondering why you chose to focus on internalizing symptoms in particular, whether it had to do with the intervention that you were most specifically interested in, and whether you have any interest in expanding to externalizing, and then additionally, the kind of approach that you have taken to mental health in general, like, for example, the RDoC approach, whether you're interested in looking kind of transdiagnostically, just some more detail on that, because I'm looking at something similar in a different data set. So yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you so much. This is a very interesting and important question. So for the intervention we are using, it actually has shown to reduce both internalizing and externalizing symptoms in previous trials. And I guess the reason why we are particularly interested in internalizing symptoms is there is a surge during early adolescent period of internalizing problems. And this intervention is more emotion-focused, about teaching how strategies to regulate emotions, better understand emotions. So we kind of start with looking at internalizing symptoms, but it will be important to look at whether it also influence externalizing symptoms.
Okay, and then is that increase in internalizing symptoms, is that increase specific to internalizing symptoms in adolescence, or is that more just like a research interest focus?
I think there is a search specifically in internalizing
Okay.
symptoms in adolescents.
Okay, I'll have to look into that more. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It was a great talk. So I'm asking about. So you said in future you're gonna study the father kind of parenting. So are you interested in studying the emotional component of parenting by fathers, or more higher order functions, brain functions that fathers could contribute to?
Yeah, I think even though a lot of kind of common understanding is mothers do most of the emotion-related parenting, but fathers play a really important role as well. And meta-analysis shows that fathers' involvement can shape emotional development in children's emotional developmental outcomes. So I think in the future, it will be important to look at when we include fathers in these interventions, how that influence brain function and mental health outcomes. And also it will be important to include boys as well, so to look at different kind of sex dynamics and how that will shape the outcomes.
Yeah, okay. Don't anticipate fathers would be positive contribution towards the emotions correction. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.